Hi, welcome to our video on gradebook setup. In this video, we're going to cover the initial steps for setting up your gradebook, setting up your weights and categories within each class, within each term. We're going to talk about the steps. After we go through the steps, then we'll go online and we will actually do some initial gradebook setup on the training site. Then we'll come back and talk about some important points to consider as we wrap up the video. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and talk a little bit about the gradebook setup itself. Now it's really very important that you understand what the hierarchy is of the gradebook, how everything interrelates, because that will help you in defining how you want to set up your gradebook. So if we take a look at just a real basic gradebook setup, you'll see that in this gradebook setup, I have my gradebook and only have one class defined. For that class, I have my 4 terms. That represents my 4 grading periods. I also have a final grade. Notice that each term has its own set of categories. So let's take a look a little deeper in that. So if you look at term 1, you can see that I have 4 categories defined. I have classwork for 40%, tests for 30%, projects for 10%, and homework for 20%. Now if we drill just a little deeper into that, notice that for each of my categories, here they are, my 4 categories, that each category in turn has assignments. Assignment 1, assignment 2, and assignment 3. And then each assignment in turn has grades, the grades that each student earned. So there's John Doe and Jane Doe. So that's the hierarchy. Class to term, term to category, from a category to assignments, and each assignment to grades. Notice my term 2 does not have as many categories as the first term does. I don't have projects in term 2, and so I made up for that change in percentage across the other categories that are there. Each set of categories for a term has to add up to 100%. So you can see it's a pretty standard setup. Term 1 is identical to term 3, term 2 is identical to term 4, but they each have their own categories and each have their own weights. So now let's take a look at my gradebook when I add my second class. So in this example, I've added math, and I have my 4 terms, and I have my final grade defined. But notice here that each of my terms are just like the other. Term 1 is the same as term 2, is the same as term 3, is the same as term 4. I have the same categories with the same weights. So for this class, it's pretty standard across all terms, which is different than it is for reading. The takeaway for all of this is that each class has its standard set of terms, which represent the grading period. Each grading period can have its own set of categories, and those categories will then have assignments and grades. Your categories must be weighted so that they add up to 100. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, and I'll emphasize this at the end of the video, if you want to standardize your grade books within your campus, or maybe even within, within your campus would be great. Try to pick similar names for assignments and tests. And I know for assignments it may be difficult to do, but at least for tests. Because when a student transfers from one class to another, if the assignments or tests, if those are named the same, then the grades will transfer over from one grade book to another. If the assignment names are not the same, then what will transfer over is going to be a grade value that will be used as a starting point for that grade book. But if you keep the same assignment names, if you all decide to pick the same test names or whatever, then when a student moves from one class to another, then those will carry over. So it's important to realize that. All right, let's talk about how to go ahead and write all this down so we can put it into our grade book. So I would recommend that what you do is that you get a piece of paper and do like a little chart like I have. You don't have to do this, but I think this will help you in setting up your categories. Notice that what I've done is I have all my categories listed across the top of this table, and on the rows I have my classes and I have my terms. So I've already listed all my categories that I'm going to use across all my classes, and then I start just filling in the weights for each of those terms. Notice that terms 1 and 3 for reading are the same, and so they're all going to share these same weights. Terms 2 and 4 share these weights, and notice I don't make use of the project category in terms 2 and 4 for reading. But math, here I say terms 1 through 4 all have the same weights. And I do the same for science and for my social studies class. So with this, now I'm all ready to go into Skyward and start setting up my gradebook. These are the steps that we will follow. Now I'm assuming that you've already gone through your a video and are familiar with how to sign in to the system and get to the dashboard, because that's going to be our starting point. So from the dashboard, well, I'll click on the hamburger, click on Gradebook, and I must be in teacher mode. I'm going to click on Grade Sheet, that's on the feature panel. Then I need to ensure that I'm on the right class, because I will be working on a class at a time, and I need to make sure that I'm on the right class. So I'll select my class. Then I'll click on Settings on the upper right hand portion of the page. From there, once the page refreshes, I'm going to click on Grade Calculations on the left part of the page. Then I'll start working on my Term 1. Once I open up Term 1, then I will put in there select my grade categories and weights, and I will save them. And then I'm going to show you what your options are for the rest of the terms and your rest of your classes. All right, let's go ahead and give this a go. I've already signed in. I'm on my dashboard. I'm going to click on my main menu here, the hamburger. I'm going to go to Gradebook. Notice I have Grade Sheet here in the Features panel. I'm going to click on Grade Sheet. My grade sheet opens up. I am already in the class I want to work on, which is reading, but I could change it right here, but I am going to stay on reading. Notice over here is the settings option, a little gear, so I'm going to click on that. The page has refreshed. I'm going to come over to this side now and click on Grade Calculations. And here are my terms. Term 1, Term 2, Term 3, and Term 4. Here's my final grade calculation. For secondary schools, you will probably see a citizenship term, and you will also see a Semester 1 exam and a Semester 2 exam. Those are all terms you can use to place in there your assignments and your tests, if you have any that are applicable. You do not have to fill in every term if it's not applicable to your class. But in general, you will use each one of these terms, terms 1 through 4. All right, so let's get started on Term 1. So here's my little selector arrow here on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on that. Here's my list of categories. So just a word on categories. So if you remember GradeSpeed had the ability for you to name any category you wanted. And that was great, except for the fact that we ended up with over 1,000 different categories across the district. Skyward works differently in that the category list is standardized. So what was done was that a committee was formed. They reviewed all the categories, well over 1,000 of them, and boiled them down to the top 40. So here they are, the top 40 categories that were used last year. And I feel pretty confident that you can find a category that you can use in your grade book. If you have something that is particularly unique, then you can use one of the standard categories. And so what you'll do is here's categories 1 through 6. You can pick one and you can use that category. It will say category 1 in your grade book, but you can tell your parents that say category 1 is our dissections. But you can see we have a whole variety of them, everything from essays to field work, observations, participation. But I have daily work for 50% right now and tests for 50%. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick assessments and projects. I'm going to make this 10%. And I'm going to pick, where's my other one? I want homework. Where is my homework? Oh, here's projects just by itself. Anyway, let me pick something else here. Here's classwork homework. Click on that. And I'm going to make this 30%. Notice I have 30, and I have 10, 50, and 50. That's over 100. If I were to try to save and go back right now, system would give me an error saying that things don't add up to 100. So I need to go ahead and make my adjustments. So I've got about, I guess I got about 40% hanging out here, 30% down there, 10% here. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this here, I'll make this 40%, and I'm going to make tests 20%. Now I will do save and back. And my term 1 is defined. Notice I have a triangle now for term 1 that did not appear for my other terms. And that's because these other terms are set to the default, which was 50-50. Remember when I first went into term 1, it was 50-50. These are still 50-50. But now because term 1 has been modified, has been changed from the default, I have this little triangle. And this little triangle gives me some nice abilities. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to show you I can now copy those grade calculation terms, grade calculation categories to my other terms. So I click here, and it says, all right, you picked term 1. What do you want to copy that onto? And I'm going to say, we'll copy it to terms 2, 3, and 4. I could have just picked just term 3 if I wanted to, but I'm going to copy it to all of them. Now I click on Run Process. Excuse me. Click on Close, and there it is. I am done. I have now copied my categories and weights from term 1 across to my other terms. If I open up term 4, for example, here they are. Assignments, classwork, daily work, and tests. They copied right over. So I am done setting up that one class in terms of my categories and weights. But let's say that I'm a secondary high school teacher, and I teach Algebra 1 all day long. And all of my classes are pretty much well the same in terms of the assignments and the grades and the weights and everything. Once I have my first class set up, see I have reading set up right here. Let's pretend that was Algebra 1, first period. Now I could go ahead and click here on Copy Grade Settings to Other Classes. And I can tell it I want to copy defaults. And I'm going to copy grade calculations. And then it says, okay, to which other classes do you want to copy that to? And so, in high school it would probably be, now my Algebra 1 and, the different sections, periods. Now I would just copy it across. For elementary school, it probably isn't applicable unless you have a very basic grade book that is, the same across all of your classes. Once you do that, you click on Next. By the way, you cannot copy things onto conduct. Conduct is not a gradable class. It's not one where you get a grade, so you can't do that for the conduct class. Anyway, notice what it's telling me. It says, okay, these are the things that are going to be copied. Click on Next again. It tells me one more time, this is what it's going to do. Click on Run Process, and if everything works out right, I should get a report here that says, okay, there it is. Everything has now been copied. Click on Close. And now every one of my classes has been set up the same way. Let's take a look. I'm going to go to my grade sheet. I'm going to come down here to Mathematics. I'm going to go to Settings. This is just to double check, just so I can show you. I'm going to go to Grade Calculations. And if I open up my Term 1, oops, I'm sorry. Got to pick on the selector arrow. If I open up Term 1, see, here it is, Assessments, Classwork, Daily Work, and Tests. exactly the way I had done it in my other class. That's a really handy feature. And really that's all there is to doing your initial setup. Let me go back to the dashboard. And that's it. We've done an initial setup of our gradebook. We went ahead and actually did on step 10, you can see I identified here that if each term is identical, you can copy term 1 to the other terms using that little down arrow and then selecting the copy. Notice that we were able to go ahead and set up the other terms identical to term 1. And then after that, I showed you how you could go ahead and copy that one class to other classes. So that does our whole initial setup of categories and weights for each of the terms for each of our classes. So I think you'll find that that process takes a little bit of work to set it up, but once you get your first one set, then it's a matter of copying to other terms. If you have classes that have different categories and weights, then you just go through the same process for each class. Otherwise, if your classes are all very similar, you can copy one class setup to another. It's pretty straightforward. So thank you very much for watching this video, and there's other videos to watch. So go ahead and watch some more videos. Thanks again.